Hello, everyone, and welcome to lunch. That's it. I'll stay here for a bit. Well, we were planning this talk, and yesterday walked out of a session, and I heard this really earnest, almost exasperated, frustrated person saying, "Not another software vendor trying to sell me their tech. I get it, you sell that stuff, but really tell me about how it can help me." And so today, we'll just spend a little time together. I'll tell you a little bit of a story on some of our experience on knowledge management initiatives that have been successful, and hopefully leave you with a few lessons to be better prepared for the world you look to influence, the knowledge systems you look to create, and the people you look to help empower in the organizations for the better. So, to get started, get this out of the way. I'm Nimit Mehta. I'm the CEO of Top Quadrant. We're an enterprise knowledge management software. We help large enterprises, some of the largest enterprises in the world, organize their data and deploy it safely for the creation of new products and the betterment of relationships between companies and their customers. We have a specific bent on the world, which is the semantics and knowledge graphs, which everyone, I think, has been in the ether in the world. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, maybe give a little bit more of a defined, or at least our point of view on it. And as I said, give you all an opportunity to hear a few trends that we see in the world and in our deployments of successful knowledge management, and then actually talk a bit about how that played out with one of our customers. So, to dig in, this is actually a problem statement that we see in pretty much every enterprise knowledge management experience today. We have a phrase in our company which is, why 5 years ago versus now? Why now versus 5 years ago? And why now versus 5 years from now? At this moment in time, we're generating data, inordinate amounts of it, to a point that 5 years ago we couldn't store, we couldn't understand. And we believe 5 years from now this is a world that'll be organized, and we're putting teeth around knowledge management to the betterment and clarity of organizations. You all are looking to take the knowledge that your organization is generating and deploy it within context and safely. And these are two core elements that we end up spending a lot of our time on. So, as promised, I'll tell you a story. Enter our protagonists. We were brought in by the CDO and the head of information governance at a financial services organization. And the situation was, I don't say necessarily unique, though it was interesting. It was new CDO, really excited to organize data, but also manage information safely and compliantly. There's also this principle of a data fabric that kind of caught hold. The challenge was, as we all know, the knowledge management software graveyard exists. And great, well-intentioned deployments and applications kind of fall by the wayside. And so there was a lot of unlearning the organization needed to do. Similarly, data was duplicative, redundant, contradictory, and the knowledge interpreted, able to be interpreted from that data was really murky. So as I said, we're going to talk a case study, and we're not going to hide the bag. There's 4 real trends that we're seeing in the market that will be depicted in this story. But first, it's around this word semantics. And we see semantics as the neural center of data X, data fabric, data mesh, data whatever. Right? There's permutations that have existed for years and will continue to exist. But a realization that context is data without context is useless. Data with context is knowledge. And that is the world that we look to play in. Second, we have another phrase, which is no more science projects. Building applications really matters. There we go. Sharing through collaboration is key. Enabling folks to work together to externalize what's in their head for the betterment of others is a way to take care of your organization and support growth. And lastly, the sharing of this is not owned by any one team. It is a shared asset that everyone has the ability to add to and derive from. So, trend one we'll talk about, which is, raise your hand if you've heard of any of these concepts, data mesh, data fabric. Keep your hand up if you think your organization is very clear and unified in what this all means. I work in this space and I don't. It's well-intentioned. We have our bent on this. Mesh is an architectural paradigm, and Fabric's a deployment paradigm, and we can have arguments about it. What it's trying, at the core, both of these are trying to do is enable an organization to say, we have incredibly valuable data. You believe it, you feel it, but feeling is not a strategy. And so how do we put this out into the world to make better decisions, to make more accurate decisions at a faster pace? Oftentimes in humans, but more increasingly with machines. So the jury has kind of concluded, though, at the center of this, each of these paradigms requires data to be in context. And we have heard this word semantics over and over again. All semantics is context, enabling your teams to put the information that puts data into a usable, understandable format for broader consumption. And so I'll enter with the story that we were talking about. We were able to latch on to this trend that mattered to this organization. And in doing so, we're able to get leadership buy-in, but also latch on to something that actually needed definition. So working alongside the head of information governance, the CDO, to actually say, data actually needs context. Let's help you do that. Second trend. I mentioned this earlier. We were fixated on applications. An application to us means something very specific. It has 4 elements, and there's 4 types. Element 1 has a KPI, has a performance measure that's measurable. It is a defined problem that matters to a senior leader that relies upon reshareable data. That data, or reshareable knowledge, that is important to the organization, not just to one team. There are 4 types of projects. There are 4 types of applications, all really relating to the impact that it can create. You can either save cost, save time, reduce risk, create revenue. That's it. If it doesn't relate to those 4 things, it's not actually, we have a belief that there's a real risk of it succeeding. A science project is anything other than that. Something that ends with, wow, that's cool, or it's interesting. Or we get to do things, we don't know what those things are from it. So being really almost being narrow and right, we've learned to avoid the semantic graveyard or the knowledge management graveyard, you got to focus on what matters. Coming back to the story, what this allowed us to do is almost offer an organization a menu of things to almost choose and prioritize what mattered to them. We chose 2 to start. It's typically easier to start at solutions or applications that mitigate risk, save cost, just because people get that. So we chose one around GDPR compliance, and the other was around fraud detection. These 2 mattered. They're business critical. And when you have a uniform understanding of what matters, a uniform understanding of concepts, we were able to power it through the work we were going to do. It also allowed us to have a banner where people were able to walk around internally and say, this is what we're solving. We're not solving an interesting tag problem. We're solving fraud. We're solving, compliance. Now, how do we do it? So, collaborating, the biggest problem in this organization was that knowledge resided in people's brains and not in a system. And even worse, there were systems that were contradictory that tried to solve this problem over and over again. 4 big issues. 1, didn't capture enough, so some stuff stayed in people's heads and you lost it when they retired or left. 2, you captured too much, and actually there was redundancy in either a reusable taxonomy or a reusable code list or a reusable best practice set. 3rd, there's contradiction, which is 2 recommendations actually say the exact opposite thing. And how do you enable reconciliation on that? And 4 is extensibility. This was a very acquisitive company. So they acquired a new company. How do you ensure that what that new company knows is immediately tied into the knowledge base, either data assets or tags or concepts that our client actually was working on? So the rules here were really simple. We took a step back and said, what matters here? Your organization sees the world in one way, really. There's many different points of view, but really your organization as an entity has a single approach. And you need specific tools to enable that. We saw 3 really important ones. Governance, to decide who touches and can edit your uniform understanding of your knowledge base. Second is really policy. The if this, then that. What do you do when a data asset exists or is trying to be moved or to be done? Those policies are uniform and need to be reconciled. And lastly was workflows, which is how do you enable a big tent, right? I mean, we all have seen knowledge management at times sit in the corner of an organization somewhere. How do you ensure that the folks who are going to be using the data you create are actually able to understand what you're doing and suggest new connections and new concepts? The 4th trend actually is, I'll skip a little forward. So the outcome here was a few applications that really mattered to the organization and built upon the same same infrastructure. As you can see, at the center of that infrastructure was data and connections and knowledge and an ability to actually build applications around specific outcomes that mattered to different teams and different leaders, but frankly, didn't need to be redone and rebuilt. I had a conversation with the leader there, and she says, this infrastructure kind of ages like fine wine. You have the ability to, the more rich your connections are, the more valuable the data, the more important the knowledge, the better applications you can use to drive your organization. And so I'm keeping an eye on time because I think we're running a little close. And what we saw is we've actually deployed 3 of these applications and are internally marketing and discussing all the different ways that your organization sees the world to drive better outcomes and actually change the way the organization sees being application-driven all the way to actually being data-centric, where applications are just the manifestations that drive your business to better outcomes. Lastly, this is a tough journey. It takes a little bit of time, but you can see that over time, as you build success, the value of that centralized data set actually grows and actually becomes more rich. So that's the story. A few recommendations as you go out to the world and drive change. From this story, is focus on an outcome. Be clear, crystal clear about what that means to you. Make sure it matters to people internally. That drives the business. Taxonomies are the beginning, but they're not the end. Taxonomies could be just a flat list of terms, but context around those taxonomies, concepts really matter to your organization and actually can be incredibly powerful. Pick a standards compliant, pick a tool. It gives you technological infrastructure. Do something. It doesn't even matter what the tool is. I say that as a software company, having something that gets your team working together in a systematic way is a behavior change that will help you as you continue to incrementally gain an influence, but also change the way your organization thinks. And then lastly, the goal is to share language. Right? You're trying to actually build knowledge that's reusable. And it's reconciled across your whole team so that when you talk, everyone in your organization talks the same way, and every machine and human interaction is more efficient and more targeted. The last thing is we're in the business, we all are, everyone in this room is in the business of knowledge usage. And the name of the conference, Knowledge Management, is very, very good, but it's still very static to us. And we really want to actually take all the knowledge we have and not just create a nice tool on the shelf, but enable the organizations we run to be better, faster, operate cheaper, and actually serve people better. So we talk about this internally, but I'll see you all at Knowledge Uses World 2023.